Hi, everyone. Welcome to our final session of day 2 of Within Summit. Thank you so much, everybody, for hopping on, for being here throughout the day, sticking with us from early this morning. I know we've had a long day, but we're going to close it out with an amazing session today on grief and eating disorders with the incredible Rebecca Brom. I'm so excited to introduce Rebecca. She is the Chief Clinical Officer of Within Health. As a graduate of Central Michigan University, she is passionate about the mind-body-soul connection. Her leadership style as well as clinical approach reflect these values. Though she has helped clients through a variety of challenges in her practice as a therapist since 2005, she specializes in helping people work to improve their body image, heal their relationships with themselves, and overcome eating disorders. So like I said, Rebecca is going to be leading us in a session today about grief and eating disorders. I would love to encourage everybody to use the chat function, use the Q&A function. We will be having some time today to go over your questions. So if anything pops up, put it in the chat and we would love to get to those questions for you. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Kath. Hi, everyone. It is so wonderful to be back at another year of the summit and back together and learning together. And I'm really excited to be here talking about grief and eating disorders. It is If you would have asked me 10 years ago if this would be a topic that I love, I would have told you no. My insight today is that I would have shied away from it. I would have felt overwhelmed by it. But something dawned on me as I was prepping today for the presentation that very few things are something that we will all experience, and we will all experience loss in our lives. So this is particularly relevant to the providers in the audience, for provider reasons, but also particularly relevant to the humans in the audience. So I really am opening up my heart today, connecting with all of you on this topic, and hoping that you show up with an open heart and an open mind and an opportunity to learn about this topic together. What I hoped you would take away from today's presentation, I have the objective of us all understanding more about grief, and with that understanding, move toward feeling more comfortable with somebody who is in the grieving process. It can activate a lot of pain, discomfort, uncertainty in us as providers, and when we're with other people who are walking through that. So if you leave with nothing else from today, is I hope you leave with more comfort and more knowing what to do in those circumstances where somebody is looking for support in that. With that, we'll look at what happens when somebody is grieving, how to help individuals gain more resilience, find meaning, and find growth in the experience. And then, of course, we'll merge that all in the intersection between grief and eating disorders and eating disorder treatment. We'll do that today with an agenda of looking at past theories of grief. And I wanted to do that particularly because those past theories have really stayed almost the status quo. And so I'll help you to understand maybe some of the ideas and preconceived notions you have towards grief. And then introduce some of the newer concepts, the newer literature and understanding of grief. Again, we'll talk a lot about grief and eating disorder overlap. And then I would love for you to understand some of the interventions and the goals and the aims of interventions. And then, of course, I'd love for you to leave with some interventions that you can try with people you love, with yourself, and also with the patients that you work with. Kath did a lovely job of introducing me, and I have the slide up mostly to highlight my experience in the eating disorder field. I've been in the field for 20 years, and I am bringing that part of me to you today. But what I'm also bringing with you to you today is the professional part and a little bit more of what's underneath my professional, I'll say, armor. So many of you probably know Jamie Singletary. I just saw her beautiful face just pop back up. This is a topic that she and I have connected on, and the last time I gave it, she bravely encouraged me to show even more of that. So I'm going to do that today for all of you a little bit more, kind of use myself as a guinea pig as well as talk about some of the client experiences. I think about when I became a mother. And I felt like all of a sudden I had been introduced to this club where everybody knew how hard it was, and nobody talked about it. And I kind of felt like you all knew it was this hard, and nobody ever said that to me before I became a mother. And I kind of felt that same way when I first experienced grief. So I now feel like it's important to speak about, and I'm even looking at a comment in the chat here, being thanked about talking about this. We don't talk about it as much as we can, and so to normalize some of what this experience is like and to hold the pain and to also hold what comes next with all of it is a place that I really want to show up for everyone for today. So you can see the two pictures that I have on my slides, and the one with the man with the baby. That was my brother-in-law, my husband's Irish twin. For those of you who know what that means, they were, I think, 11 months apart. So Billy was 11 months older than my husband. And when he was 35 and my husband was 34 and I was 33, he went to the emergency room because he was having severe pain, and he was diagnosed with cancer that day. And within a year, he passed away. My oldest was in kindergarten at that time. And it was our family's first experience of having significant loss, where the person in our life that was there day to day was no longer, was just not there. And I walked that path as a therapist. Many of you that are joining me are clinicians. Sometimes we get leaned into because of that training and expertise. And so my mother-in-law and my father-in-law and my sister-in-law and my husband's grandparents all thankfully leaned in to me and the experience. And it was so incredibly heavy on their soul to have that loss. And it was my first experience of seeing that in action and how it could really devastate and impact a family. And then about 5 years later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And you can see her here in the picture too. This is my mom. And this was at my sister's wedding. And you can see my sisters and I are all around her. And she passed away about 6 months after my sister's wedding. And at that point in time, I felt like I am trained to know how to do this, and I feel lost. I don't know what to do. I don't know what it is that I'm experiencing. And I feel that everything I understand about the world is not to be what I thought. So I'm going to share a little bit about that and share a little bit about what I learned, and share that my coping style has always been to figure it out. And so I pursued a grief certification and got trained in as many modalities of understanding grief as I could, because I knew, I'm going to say, um, I reached for people who had done this before and done it in a way that I admired to show me how to get through it. So I learned a lot along the way, And I'm going to speak to you from the professional, but also going to speak to you from the person that has also experienced that. So I might ask you, and maybe those of you who are here have already kind of self-selected as people who have a little bit more openness to this topic. But when you think about being with uh, people's grief, being with a client who is in their grief, I know when I've talked to colleagues about this, some of them feel very overwhelmed, some of them feel afraid. Some of them, when they think about the circumstances that the patient has gone through, and I won't share specifics, but can think of really difficult situations where parents have lost children or have lost spouses to suicide. Um, Sometimes clinicians can feel that they don't know how they would handle that, and so how can they help walk somebody else through that? So I would just ask you to take a second to think about your first reaction to being with somebody in their grief. What is our first pull to that? The kind of the first human experience of it. And I'll say, when I was a young clinician, I the first time I can remember having that experience of working with somebody who had been through grief, I'll say traumatic grief. Um, I brought it to supervision, and this was about maybe 18 months after this young man in his 30s or so. His father had been riding a bike with his mother and hit a very small rock, and dad flipped over the handlebars, landed on his head, and passed away very shortly after. And it took several months for him to open up to me about that, but he was still really unraveled and had a really emotional, tearful experience. And so I brought it to peer supervision, and the psychologist that was leading the peer supervision said to me, "It's been long enough. He should be over that. That shouldn't affect him." And so I ran with that assumption. And I want to make sure now, having had the experiences of diving into that, I think that that's too prevalent out there. And I want to make sure that we are operating from the framework of understanding grief at a much more in-depth understanding so that we can feel comfortable showing up with our whole hearts and not perpetuating old expectations. I would encourage us to think through grief as trauma. I think trauma is a topic that many more of us feel that we've been trained in or that we've been exposed to, and maybe feel a little bit more comfortable fully understanding. Um, and so, thinking about grief as trauma, Stephen Porges says, trauma is a chronic disruption of connectedness, and we don't disrupt connection more than completely losing that person. Um, Attributes of trauma, um, it can include perceiving the experience to be inescapable. Grief is certainly inescapable. We can't get away from it. We can't change it. Um, the confrontation of perceived or actual death, either physical or psychological. I'll talk more about this. But when we lose somebody who we are really connected to, we lose a version of ourselves as well. So we're grieving the loss of that person, but we're also grieving the loss of ourselves that no longer exists in the context of that person. Certainly, grief propels the brain and body into survival mode. It overwhelms, as I spoke to earlier, this usual coping abilities, creates significant distress and dysfunction. And we'll talk about this assumptive world. Many of us operate from these assumptions that we'll go home and we'll see our family tonight and we'll go to bed and have dinner. And grief will violate that assumptive world for a long time. So, uh, Freud's approach to grief was that we need to detach, that any ongoing connection or need or um, ongoing living on of the individual that we lost is dysfunctional, is pathological. And so the goal was acceptance and to move on, to proceed. I'd love for us to think about how in the world today, some of that is still perpetuated. Um, People get back to work or expected to kind of go back to life. And there's not as much as a culture opportunity to heal from grief. And then more evolved is Dr. Kubler-Ross's understanding of the 5 stages of grief. Probably if you had an educational experience like I did, this was pretty much the full gamut of grief that you took away from the experience. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said that there were 5 stages of grief, and they were denial, ignoring that that was going on, anger, when you started to realize that the circumstances were unchangeable, bargaining, being willing to do anything and look for any way that you might fix or change the situation, depression, when you realize that it was unchangeable, and then finally moving into acceptance. But this approach, in theory, was never intended to describe the process of grief. It was never just meant to describe the process of loss. It was created to describe the process of an individual who is diagnosed with their own terminal illness. So while it has a lot of applicability, it wasn't created with the grief process as its core. And there is a lot of overlap in these stages, but what becomes confusing for people is that it's not a linear process that once you're through anger, the next stage is bargaining. And once you hit bargaining, you'll never go back to denial or anger. And the unintended negative consequence of this is that sometimes people feel very confused, betrayed, frustrated, lost when they move through the stages and then find themselves at a different earlier stage. So what we know about grief now is that there is no universality to the emotional trajectory. So you won't step through those stages. And so you can still use those stages, but what I would emphasize for people is that you can bounce through a lot of them. And with grief, the longer time goes on, the easier it gets to hold it. But some days can be just like it happened yesterday. And that's normal and that's okay. What we want to see as growth is that you fall in the hole and then you fall less deep and you spend less time there and you accept and you feel empowered to hold the experience of the grief. So for example, my mom has been gone since 2020. She had her 5-year anniversary of being gone this year. And my sister, who's only a couple years younger than I am, has been struggling with infertility for about 7 years. And she finally had a child this year. And we were so excited. So many blessings around that for her. And yet I felt very, very sad on that day. And I didn't expect to feel sad. And And I felt like it was the same day or the same, time frame where I was experiencing that loss directly. And if you can't tell, I feel teary-eyed just thinking about it. But I remember feeling how sad and unfair it is that my mom isn't here to experience this, that it's another huge milestone that she won't get to see. And it felt like it was that same day that I lost her. So I really want to normalize that's not dysfunctional. That is not an indication that somebody has not progressed in their life. But what I can see is that I can hold it. I can create space for it. In fact, I reached out to friends and colleagues and said, hey, I just need a little space for this. I could that day. And if I couldn't, that would be okay too. Um, I have a dear friend who lost her son to suicide about 3 years before I lost my mom. And she and I have kind of been walking the trajectory. She is a therapist as well. And I did ask her this year, I said, hey, at the 5-year mark, did it feel like you were kind of like a different person, like a whole experience? It had changed, like you had changed, you had become the new person, and that it was much more manageable. And she and I both agreed that it was that amount of time that felt like um, needed to pass before it felt like you could become the new version of you that didn't feel so raw. Um, I like to make sure that people understand when I'm working with them in a clinical setting that it will take a year to process all of the new ways to experience grief. In fact, so much so that the DSM has prolonged grief disorder, but it is not able to be diagnosed until somebody is a year past the loss. So things that feel so disrupted in that first year are a normal part of the grieving process. And I like for people to understand that as well, because it can feel like somebody feels very broken. Um, so I want to show this. Kintsugi is how you pronounce this. And if you look at this piece of pottery, you can see the gold slivers throughout. And this is a type of pottery that is done when something is broken, a piece is broken, and then it's put back together. And it's repaired with like a gold resin so that the lines where it was broken bring it back together and is thought to create a really unique part of its beauty. And I like to explain this idea when I think when I speak to people about grief. I remember feeling uh, broken in the sense that if you look at this bowl, um, it has been broken. And if you look at it, it will never be unbroken. And yet it's new and beautiful and unique because of that, the new state that it's in. So it can kind of be a both and, right? The experience may forever change us, and it may forever also make us a much a lovely version of ourselves. I won't say lovelier, but just a new version of us. I didn't share the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross quote from the beginning. I do have it up in my office, so I'll grab it when we have a second and I'll read it to you. So our new understandings, we're not required to let go. In fact, the opposite of this, that a continued bond can be very healthy for us, that Their relationship is not gone, but it's changed. So we no longer believe that we have to leave that loved one behind. We can reestablish a relationship with them. That communication can continue, and you can maintain a presence of them in your life. So I'll tell you, with my brother-in-law, it's cardinals. My family has just anytime they see a cardinal, they feel this presence of their son. And for me, and I've heard these sayings before, but they never have rang so true. Um, it's pennies. And so some of the times in my life, my son had a really difficult situation. I was on the outside of an Outback Steakhouse, I think, on a phone call trying to talk through the situation. And I looked down and there was a penny right at my feet. Um, Another difficult situation at work. A penny should not be underneath my desk. There'd be no reason for it to be. And there was a penny when I looked down. So this may be different for a lot of people. I think about one of my clients. She sees his birth date in a lot of different places. And it's what that communicates to the person. This person is still present in my life. And we can encourage and facilitate discussion with our clients about how do you think that your loved one would want to show up in your life? What would you want them to know about this? My sisters and I have a thing where we'll say, now, what do you think mom would say about that? And it's a way of keeping her alive in our lives. This one is logical, and it creates understanding of why things feel as difficult as they are. So if you can picture, maybe last night you woke up and you um, had to get up and go to the bathroom or get a drink of water. And let's say you, in a dark room, you got up and you stumbled out into your living room and into your kitchen. You could probably navigate that scene pretty well without the use of your sight, because you have this internalized map, almost like a internalized Google map of your home, of your circumstances, of your surroundings. But if, let's say, this can happen a lot in my home, two teenage boys maybe move something out of place and you step on something, or you run into a piece of furniture. That causes the map to kind of glitch and say, this is not data that's consistent with the map. And that's fine in the middle of the night when you're proceeding. But what happens in loss is that the map is in there, but the loss reminds us constantly that what we're doing is not something that we need to continue to do. It's a constant reminder that that loved one is no longer there. So for instance, I'm thinking about a client who lost a pet, a dear pet, and she every day, first thing she would do is get up and she would put water on the floor. And every day when she did that, at some point during that process, she would be reminded that there was not a reason for her to do that. And so the act, and then the being reminded that the pet was no longer there, was so painful for her. I think about another client who continued to prepare meals for two after her spouse passed away. And it was the kind of the CBT of it, right? The thoughts about the thoughts. Why am I doing this? Why do I keep repeating this painful thing that guts me to my core when I remember that this person is no longer around? Why do I go to pick up the phone to call this person and don't realize that they're not there until I've dialed half the numbers? And then I feel that sting of pain again. So we can normalize this a lot for people and help them understand that in that year, In that first year, they're updating the map, they're updating the system. And in that second year, they're reminded that the system is now updated and will continue to be updated, will no longer look the way that it was. And so that whole process is grieving along the way through those moments of update, moments of learning to live in the new life. This one is also one that's really good to know, and I think causes causes a lot of pain. So the the family system experiences loss as well. So the individual experiences loss, the family system experiences loss. So the role that that individual played in the family is it's no longer being held or maintained, and so the system changes. And then each person is experiencing the loss in a different way. And that can also cause difficulty, disconnection, missed opportunity for connection. So thinking about woman who lost a child, and her response was to want to become closer to her other child. But that other child was very different than the child that she lost. The child that she lost was very open and loving and lovey-dovey. And the child that was still in her life was much more closed off and kind of felt overwhelmed by that. And she was making a pull for that. And the sibling was also in their own grief and wanting to withdraw as they're coping. And so the rejection and loss was felt on both sides, from the loss of the child and sibling, but also the loss of one another as they knew one another. So this is one of the more painful dynamics that people experience, is not only have I lost this person, but I've lost, can be that I've lost the way that my family is, the way that I knew my family. And so the experience can be incredibly isolating for individuals, and it can be really disconnecting. And I want to share this for a couple reasons. My experience with my mom's passing, my narrative was my mom and dad met when they were 20 years old. They knew each other for 6 weeks and they got engaged, got married shortly thereafter. And then a year after they were married, I was born. And so my narrative was that they were so in love and kind of had this fairy tale experience of one another. And after my mom passed, my dad made it maybe a week or two, and immediately started to date after 40 years of marriage. And we'll talk about needs and things like that around some of this as insight. But immediately started to date, and within 6 weeks was engaged. I can see now, with the hindsight, that he was really desperately looking to figure out how to cope as well. Desperately looking for ways to meet needs that were suddenly unmet. And as you can imagine, and I'll move this here, that experience changed how I viewed the narrative I grew up with. So now it was that a false idea of how it was? Can a new person come and replace this like idea that I had about this fairy tale love that my parents had, and that can happen the exact same way? And was that how it really was? Am I who I really think I am? And so And moving into this, like the loss has changed who I am. It caused my siblings and I all to really have to look at, who am I without that person here? I remember feeling like, realizing that I had seen and experienced my dad through the prism and the looking glass that was my mom, and without her there, um, it was no longer filtered that way. And I had to see him and experience him in a different way, and he me as well. Um, I also wanted to share that because connecting with other people around that, I have found that it is so common for widowers to do that exact pattern, to join and find another partner very quickly. And so much so that I was kind of shocked about how normal it was. And I dug into the research on that as well. And men who do find partners right away um, do much better with the loss. And I did find a letter from my mom to my dad, telling him after she passed, that I want you to find love. You need to find somebody. I know you'll do better if you have somebody in your life. So lots and lots of complication around that, and lots of exploring who I am and how do I meet my needs. And my dad also, who is he now that this person is gone out of his life, and how the heck do I meet these needs without this person serving in that role and in that capacity? Okay, so let me bring it back to the intersection between grief and eating disorders. As you can imagine, loss can be a precursor for an eating disorder. It can be a way to cope with a loss. An eating disorder can also put somebody at risk for more difficulty around a loss. So it kind of works in both directions. So kind of the overt expression of an eating disorder, right, in grief can lend itself to one another. But it's also important for us to consider the more so intangible costs and loss that somebody who's dealing with an eating disorder might experience. So the loss of relationships, the way that you fully want them to be, the loss of time. I haven't said it, but I often do share my own recovery experience, and I can remember a time in my recovery journey. It sounds funny or cheeky when I say it, but I mean it with a true sense of loss. In saying, I think that I could have cured cancer with the amount of time and energy that I put towards my eating disorder that I'll never get back. The loss of money, the loss of resources that have gone into treatment or towards eating disorder, um, uh, resources, maybe procuring food, things like that, and in lost opportunities. It's important that we can give space to a space and voice to the losses that our patients are experiencing, um, when they are in the midst and when they are in the process of letting go of their eating disorder. Grieving the eating disorder is an ambiguous loss. My friends and family showed up for me when I lost my mom. They sent flowers, we engaged in rituals. I felt love and connection around that loss. There were no parties thrown or flowers sent when my eating disorder was gone. We don't do that. But it is still a loss. it can be the loss of what this was in my life, the loss of something I thought that it was that it's not. So it's an ambiguous loss. It can make you question if a true loss really did occur, right? This is something that societally, systemically, we want gone, that we're working toward being gone. But that can also make our clients feel like, was it okay for this it's not okay for it to feel sad. It's ongoing in nature. It's without closure. We feel that loss and we can't quite put our hand on it. So this is some of the ways that we can introduce that into discussion and dialogue that we're having, that we can maybe even put words to the loss or the grieving that our patients might be experiencing. A dear friend and colleague often reminds me of the both and I think that goes so much hand in hand here, that you can really want recovery, be working very hard toward it, want to be free from your eating disorder, and be grieving it leaving your life. So that alone can be a really powerful statement for our clients to understand. Um, the idea that it is no longer, or it is not, or was never the magic tool or the refuge that it once was believed to be. I'm reminded of a client who eh, did binge and purge, and her psychiatrist um, put her on Wellbutrin, but it was with the understanding that she could not purge. And thankfully, this was something that that client took to heart. And she didn't purge after that. But what she struggled with was every time she kind of had that internal map of this, something happened, something triggering happened, and I want to purge. I want to do my ritual around purging, and I can't. And I feel empty. I feel lost. I feel like the friend I would go to for comfort is no longer there. And so that was a process of grieving her experience of that, despite the fact that she didn't want to do it anymore. It was still a loss. Um, my theoretical approach is very rooted in IFS, and I love framing that the eating disorder can ride the bus, but it's no longer allowed to drive. And a metaphor that I like to use with clients is that the eating disorder urge or voice of like, they're looking at you like that. It can be maybe more so like a smoke detector. It can serve a different functionality to indicate that maybe you have a need. Maybe that need is for self-care or for acceptance, and that perhaps critical voice or voice of urge might be specifically indicating to you that you have a need that needs to be met within you. And hearing that might not indicate that there's a fire, but might indicate to you that there's something to tend to. I think as clinicians, allowing space and sadness and voice to the loss of what's changing as they're working through recovery, and then also creating an opportunity for closure. I think about, and if I had more time, I would love to speak more about rituals and community and culture and different practices that are really interesting and supportive practices that are around losing people. I have one of my sons is dating a young woman who is part Native American, And I sent flowers to the funeral home in South Dakota where the funeral was. And quite a number of people live there that are part of her tribe. And something that I found on the funeral home's website were the obituaries, but she's part of the Sioux tribe. And many of those obituaries said made their journey to the spiritual world. And I just thought it was such an interesting, different reframe of that experience that culture shared. So I share that to say, tuning into the patient's sense of how they acknowledge loss and how they circle around tending to loss, we can create that opportunity with the eating disorder as well. Okay, so if we move into therapeutic interventions and intentionality, years ago, I was trained in critical incident stress debriefing. And one of the things that I really remember from that is that when people could find meaning from their traumatic experience, they were much less likely to have PTSD. So it is something that we want to eventually help our clients to find meaning. And the first big step in that is helping them with the ability to both experience the emotion and to regulate while upset, in finding a place of I can feel this and I can move into a space of regulation. And as the research is quoted here says, it's not just essential, but it's important and essential to adaptive grieving. And then I want to highlight Bonanno's value of positive emotion. I see a lot too that clients often feel that, especially in that first year, that the joy is gone, but there is nothing to feel joyful or positive about. And so your space in working with them, being able to move and partner with them right in the time of feeling intense, difficult emotion, and also moving into a space where it's a little lighter, you can laugh a little bit, and then move back into that, can help to provide the notion that these two things we can experience both in our lives. It doesn't negate the loss to have gratitude, joy, and to feel periods where you're not as mired in all of that. So review of attachment theory, not much here, but what I want to emphasize here is loss is a forced detaching from an attachment figure. And so not only have they lost the attachment figure, but they almost suffer what I would call limbic system injury, because who they would normally go to for regulation is no longer available. And that results in this disorganization and despair. What we as providers have the opportunity to do is to serve as an attachment anchor for them to have a place to root into, and to serve as this transitional attachment figure that helps them to let go, and that centers from dysregulation to regulation. And I think I might have this, I'll talk about it here. I see, again, kind of in the family space, people grieve so differently. So think about one of the cases I worked with a woman who lost her son, and the man she was married to, he loved this man as well, and it was his stepson. So the relationship was just different. And for the husband, it was causing a lot of pain for him to see his wife in so much pain, and to feel so in the depths of her grief, that he was reacting to that pain with needing, having needs that he felt like he needed met to have there be joy and light. And so as a clinician, you are showing up in the space of not being affected by that loss. You can show up whole, where the other members of the family and the other people that are serving as attachment figures can have less demand to help regulate that person. So it's such a important role that we can play with individuals as they're walking through pain and grief, especially when their normal attachment figures maybe are not able to show up in the same way either. So our interventions they aim to provide a steady, unafflicted, as the clinician, place to mourn. We want to allow time and space for grieving. We want to walk alongside them. We want to show that we are with them and we aren't afraid of their big emotions, that we can model being there with them and tolerating them and witnessing them, and also trusting the process of them cresting and then falling back. We also want to serve as a beacon of hope. Loss is such a time where you may feel hopeless. You may feel like I said earlier, changed forever. You may feel that it will never be okay, and you can share um, that you can hold the hope for that as the clinician. You can validate their experience and their fear and their maybe even certainty that they'll never be okay, and hold it in the same space to say, um, walking with many individuals in that space, that you'll hold the hope for it because you've seen it. Probably many of us have done that with eating disorder recovery as well. Lots of times people can feel like there's no way I'll ever get to that place. And we hold the hope because we've seen it time and again. We also need to aim to help the person put words to the experience that they're having, and to find the words to make sense out of it, to almost create a coherent narrative of the experience, to allow them to feel, to be present, to witness the intense emotion, and then how to follow that with regulation, how to not stay and linger in that space, but to feel it, allow it, and then come back to a place of regulation. Part of our work is also helping to establish who I am now on the other side of that loss. So that version of you with that close individual that you lost will no longer exist. And so building up, the version 2.0 of yourself, as well as figuring out what type of relationship you want to have, how you want to keep that person present in the way that's the most meaningful to you. And then how you want to, and if there is meaning, if there's purpose, if there is anything that you want to take or that person wants to take in behind the meaning of that loss. This is a good time to remind ourselves that the most common response to trauma is growth, is resilience. Most people will find resilience in the face of adversity, including disasters and loss. So that means looking for new opportunities and possibilities, increasing personal strength, change in relationship with others, greater appreciation for life in general, and deepening spirituality. And I can tell you from my experience, I've experienced all of these things. I am a little more jaded, maybe is too strong of a word, but I do sometimes see women who are 20 years older than me walking with their mothers, and feel a pang of sadness that I'll never get to experience that. Or I see people that are my age and think about my brother-in-law and the opportunities that he missed by not being able to be a part of our years in life here. But I can also tell you that I emerged from that experience a much deeper, more connected, and able to be grateful for the relationships and the people in my life in a way that I felt like my mom had such like the strengths that she had. I feel like I took and adapted into the version that I wanted to show up with for myself. I can tell you that my relationship with my siblings is as strong as it's never been as strong. So in the way that got needs met from my mother, we've been able to find that with one another. So really knowing this, anchoring into this, and then taking that hope and projecting it out with our clients is really important. Thinking through the lens of core needs. I've spoken a lot about this, and I'm glad to be on the slide to explain a little bit more about what this means. So through this lens, we all have core needs, which include the need for love, the need for acceptance, the need for a value or a sense of self-worth, need to feel secure, and a need to feel adequate. And these can lead to a lot of good conversation with clients. I'm not a narrative therapy clinician, but I find in working with grief that it is a way to get at to kind of unlock deeper meaning and deeper reflection with clients. So this might be something that I have them write on. The idea of how has this loss impacted getting your needs met. So if we think about my dad, right, his need for love, his need for acceptance, his need to feel that he's of value, his need to feel secure, his need for adequacy, all of those things were impacted. And while that was difficult for me, he also had a need to get his own needs met as well. It can be interesting to notice how the patient is going about getting their needs met. So I think I spoke about this earlier where the client was trying to get her closeness needs met from a child who did not really ever fulfill that need for her. And she wasn't able to see until we talked about it that this was a gaping wound need for her, and she was desperately looking for places to fill that. I can also speak to this in that when I wanted empathy and kindness and a soft place to land, my mom would be the person I would call. And when I wanted like to think through things logically and to kind of have like a, hey, you can do this, you've got this, I would talk to my husband. And without really realizing it, I was going to him when I needed the soft place to land. He'd never really, that was never really his strength. And when I needed it and I didn't get it, I would be so mad at him. And yet I was the one changing that. And I can also say my siblings and I realized we were trying to get our needs that our mom met through our dad. And he was also never in a position, he never indicated to us that he could do that. And yet in the scramble to notice that those needs were unmet and needed to desperately be met, we can try to push people who don't even realize what we're doing to meet those needs. So noticing how do we attempt to restore this need? You might see people leaning more deeply into eating disorder behaviors when they're trying to regulate. And then of course, the act of noticing is the first step in changing. And then being able to have productive conversation around that, about what is the need that you're having, and then what might be a more productive way to get that need met. Um, so similar to Kubler-Ross, and similar to Erickson's stages of development, are these healing tasks in grief. So landing into a space of acceptance for what has been instead of denial, avoidance, and suppression. And I'll speak about my dad again, who he, so I live in Oklahoma, he lives in Michigan, and the first time that we all came home, and that was about maybe 3 months after my mom passed. My mom loved bold colors, so she always jewel tones. So she always painted the house in like a burgundy or a green, or and it was that way our whole lives growing up. And we came home, and the house was painted completely white, no color inside, and all of our pictures were taken down. Again, I've grown to have a lot of compassion and a much more deeper understanding of what my dad was going through. But I can see it now as he was stuck for a long time in denial and suppression. I can manage those needs that I don't have met by suppressing, by putting this all away and moving away from anything that might trigger or activate the emotions that I have to feel. Another healing task is faith versus fear. I just had a conversation with about a 30-year-old man who noticed that when he gets close to people, he closes up because when he lost his grandpa, who was very near and dear to him, that a part of him decided that he was never going to let anybody get that close again for fear of feeling that again. And so we can identify that as moving into faith versus being stuck in fear. Surrender versus control. A lot of times when we have loss, we want to try and look for ways that we can control from ever happening to us again. And then also forgiveness versus anger. So being stuck kind of in that anger stage, and moving into a place of forgiveness, potentially acceptance, and maybe learning that things are often beyond the control that we want, and we want to pretend that we have. I would be remiss to not emphasize emotional regulation and teaching emotional regulation. I love the art-based interventions. I'll have something that I'll share with you all around that too. I think they're great tools to be able to give words to words and experience to something that doesn't have, that words can't quite capture. This really is looking at increasing emotional tolerance. So somebody like my dad, right? He might need to start at a different window of tolerance for some of those big emotions. And as a clinician, I might want to build his ability to handle that, and to handle distress tolerance. versus a clinician who's lived in that and comes with a degree in it. I might start at different places with people for that. Okay, so here are some narrative therapy prompts that can be really helpful in working with somebody with loss. So what do you wish you could tell or ask the person that you've lost? What has changed? What in your life has changed with this loss? This can also be good discussion questions. What questions will never be answered as the result of this loss? So I think about my sister. She now is finding, as she's raising a new baby, she'll never know, she'll never be able to ask my mom how she was when she was at the stage. These are lost questions. And how did the loss shape the big moments of your life? So again, with my sister, how did she, how was my mom not being there a part of this big intervention in her life, big experience in her life? And if you think about, makes me think about a video that I saw where a woman lost her child. And as a result of losing the child's organs were donated to somebody. And then that man came to the woman's wedding, and how meaningful that was to her to have him show up and it be kind of the life that was able to continue going despite the fact that she had lost her child. So, and I can say, having been through the experience now for myself, I'm so much more comfortable in feeling the heart and soul of those things, where before I might turn away. I notice now, prior to doing the work that I've done, some emotional experiences could feel overwhelming for me. So again, right, creating meaning out of loss, I feel that I can be much more present in a way that I didn't even realize maybe I couldn't before that loss. Susan, you talked about art-based interventions, and I really appreciate this. This poem here that I'd like to take a minute to read to all of you is from a client who gave me permission to share it. But she, in the first year of losing her son, every day sent me a poem. She's an artist, or sent me a painting, or sent me a drawing of to explain what she was experiencing, because words just were not capturing it. So ways to find the words, and I'll save some time for us to do some of this together. Being able to put words or find expression, creative expression of the experience, has been almost a non-negotiable for me when I'm walking with people. So I want to take a second, and I'll share this. I'll read this to you, and I just would like you to stay present and to see if you can feel the essence of what this woman was feeling. So she says, "What was it like, my darling boy, when the lights were flickering dim? Were you asleep? Were you afraid that the lions had come to the den? What was it like? Were you at peace, the daily penance done, a shimmering light to illuminate the way to go back whence you had come? What was it like, your suffering gone, like a wisp of a cloud that blew out the sun? What was it like to see heaven's gates unfurled for your soul, entrusted into care to those who went before? What was it like? Did you feel our souls breaking like waves on jagged rocks below? Did you know we were there to claw back your body, to beg to be whole? What was it like? What is it like to see us so broken, learning life anew? Without you, no more words to be spoken. What is it like to see and observe all? Love as the compass for enduring one's call. Love is a constant, all that matters anyhow. Please guide us to you as only you can now know. Yeah, um, you can feel almost all of what we've talked about here. She's questioning, is he afraid? She's questioning what the experience was looked like. She talks about learning life new, learning to live life without him. And I can see for all of you in the chat here, um, this poem captures what her experience has been like. Creating connections. One of the coolest books that I experienced was Celestial Conversations. I just happened to stumble upon it, but and then since I think Dr. Tara Swart has, I believe it's called Signs, is the new book that she has. But it also talks about cultivating a relationship with the person that you loved, who you've lost, and how to keep that person present. Some people will journal, right? So they'll journal to the person, maybe say things like, hey, my son is a teenager now, and I remember when I did this to you, and now I can see how painful it was. And then you sit back and you think, how do I perceive my person talking back to me about this? And so I might say to this client that I just shared the poem with, what do you think your son would want you to feel with that fear? And so often she's able to come back with something she couldn't pull from herself, but can say, "I think he would want me to know I'm okay," or that he trusts, that I should trust that he knew he was so loved. So being able to cultivate kind of that conversation, and helping, like I said, like the penny and the cardinal and the dates, helping them to identify ways that their loved one might want to show up in their lives. The idea of pulling in spirituality that makes sense to them, and how might that happen for them. So again, more prompts around this. Reflections for growth. Who was I? Who was I when my loved one was ill? How did I change through the process? And this can be ill. This can also be for parents who have children in recovery, or loved ones in recovery, eating disorder recovery. Um, who was I when I was ill in recovery? Um, who did my loved one help me to be? Who was I in part due to the relationship with that person? Who am I now? And how do I intend to be? How do I intend to grow? And this question was really empowering for me after I realized that I had to rebuild a self. I had to rebuild a version of myself, whether I wanted to or not. And who did I want to build that version to be? Okay, and I'm seeing some really, really cool things going on in the chat. You guys are lovely participants. So some of the takeaways I would love for you to leave with is the idea that it takes much longer than I I believe culturally we allow space for to navigate grief. It takes that first year to encounter all of the encounters that need relearning. And then it takes the second year of learning and years of practice for it to become the new map. Experiencing incredible pain, perhaps the most significant pain that somebody has ever felt in their life, is normal for a time. We didn't talk about prolonged grief disorder, and I don't want to normalize prolonged grief disorder, which is a whole nother discussion. I don't want to normalize that for years and years. But intense pain and suffering is normal for a time. It can be really, really, really beneficial for people to connect with other people who have had same experiences. So for me, connecting with other people who had lost their mothers, for my clients or for my friend, connecting with other mothers who had lost children to suicide or to traumatic accidents. Sometimes it's the feeling of truly being known, especially in grief, that can be really helpful and beneficial for the person. The grief doesn't shrink, but the capacity to hold it grows. So I saw this picture and I thought it captured it so well. So if you can picture like boulders, maybe rocks. Rocks is a better analogy. So rocks in a jar, but the jar is little, and over time, it is not the rocks that grow smaller, but it's the jar that grows larger. So our capacity to have those big feelings, to have them live there, to be a part of us and to be a part of our experiences is what changes. It is not the grief that becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. I can't emphasize enough the important role that clinicians and providers can have for grievers and for families that are in grief. And let me also emphasize the overt and covert ways that our patients that are experiencing eating disorders and are in eating disorder recovery and maybe are not working towards recovery still might be experiencing grief, maybe in what they've lost in time, what they've given up in dreams, what they've run into in financial resources. There's so much grief that is associated with eating disorders that we need to be sure that we're showing up with compassion and with awareness and our eyes open and an inviting experience to talk about those things. So I want to circle into this quote, which I really love. And it says, mostly it is loss, which teaches us about the worth of things. And that is very true. A lot of the literature out there talks about how grief is almost like you can't have the light without the dark. You can't have the sun without the moon. Like these two things echo and amplify one another. And that resounds for some people. For me, it was very difficult to feel that grief was the price for experiencing love. But that has landed more softly for me over the years. But I do think that this really shows us that, highlights that. I also want to back up and go back to that initial first quote that I had, because I feel like it's very relevant for those of us that work in the eating disorder field. So We probably do a lot of empowering our clients to define beauty and define the standards, the ways that they want to be defined as showing up as beautiful in their lives. And this quote really stuck with me in the idea that it kind of works in the same vein as our work. So it says, the most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of those depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. So I want to go here again to this piece of pottery and to think about the beauty that is in that, the pieces that are not the same as they once were, and yet they still found a different piece of beauty. So I want to walk through an intervention together that I use a lot in practice. I'm going to take us back here, and I'll ask you to join me. This is a little bit more of an experiential intervention. So I would ask you to take a minute to think about something that you're willing to think about today that brings you suffering or a sense of sadness. If today it's comfortable for you to think about a loss you've experienced, I invite you to do that. And if that feels like it's too much for this space, you're invited to think of something that feels a little bit more palatable to you today. But I would like you to take yourself to that experience. And like the clinician earlier talked about an art expression, I would like you to think about and hold in your mind's eye the experience that you decided upon today for this exercise. And I would like you to put the feelings associated with that experience into colors and shapes, into a picture in your mind's eye. How is that experience represented outside of you? What shades capture it? What images? Is there something happening in the scene? How are some of the deepest expressions of that experience represented? And take a second to just notice where you feel that most in your body. What part of your body do you feel that most in? And now what I want you to do with that is I want you to put that on a canvas in your mind's eye. And I want you to frame that canvas. And that frame should be something that feels empowered to you. So for me, that might be a bright gold that word is escaping me now. Frilly, detailed frame. For you, it might be something different. And I want you to put it up on the wall of your mind's eye. That expression of the experience that you're having, framed and up on your wall. And then I want you to picture yourself standing there and you're observing that on the wall. What do you notice? What do you see? With nothing but curiosity, what is the experience like to see it, to view it? Is there anything else that you notice? And then I want you to take one step back. And I want you to notice yourself, noticing the painting. So now you are the noticer noticing. What do you feel toward the you that is observing that experience? Does it feel different being one step removed, observing, being present with the emotion, being present with the frame, being present with the being who is experiencing that experience? And is there any way that you want to make your presence known to that you that is noticing the noticing? And I'm going to give us just a couple more seconds here. And again, the goal is just awareness. And I'm going to bring us back. And if you're willing, I'd love to hear what individuals' experience was with that. And then if you want to take it through the clinical vein, what were we trying to get at? While you do that, I'm going to move us to self-compassion. So here's resources. They're up for you. There's how you get in touch with me if you need to. Yeah, self-compassion. I've had a lot of people come back through and be moved to a place when they're observing themselves experiencing the experience, are moved to a place of feeling more self-compassion. Witnessing the grief as a compassionate observer, yes. There's resources. Also building in space, being able to build in opportunity to gain distance from the experience, being able to harness that. The invitation to notice the noticer noticing. I've had clients that have done that have come back and be able to say, I'm really proud of the way that the person who's witnessing it is showing up. I'm really surprised at how much strength they have. Many things, permission for pain, the extreme pain of my spaces surrounding the loss. Yes. Did anybody notice anything about the painting that they created? Purpose, connection, knowing that I am fully capable to feel and manage the pain. Exactly. Exactly. I could keep you guys for the rest of the night. You guys just want to hang out with me until tomorrow. um, Thank you all so very much. I see we're right at time. I love the difference of experience here. Thank you so much for showing up with me. You all were not afraid to join me in being vulnerable. And I so honor that. And I feel more connected even through this virtual space to all of you. Thank you. I see your souls and I really appreciate them. Um, Here is where you can get in touch with me if you need anything. Thank you so much.
Rebecca, thank you. That was amazing. Such a powerful, meaningful conversation. And I saw so many beautiful reflections in the chat this evening. Everyone, thank you for sharing. So with that, we will close out our final session for day 2 of Within Summit. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that we will see you again back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific time. We will be having the Healing Library, and we'll be having a conversation with some authors, be talking about their books and them sharing their own reflections. So again, thank you so much, Rebecca, and thank you everyone for being here. Have a great evening.